Good evening, everyone. My name is Bob Abbey. I'm an adult services librarian for the City of Forest Grove, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's watching tonight on Facebook and YouTube for our evening with Oregon's Poet Laureate, Anis Mojgani. We will bring Anis on momentarily. And, let's see here. We try to see what's happening on, looks like we're having some problems on Facebook. Not quite sure what's happening on Facebook. Well, let me see here. I'm going to play around here with this and see if I can figure out what's going on with Facebook. Alright, so we're not showing up on Facebook for some reason. Not sure what's going on. Let me... Let me see if I can figure out what is happening with Facebook. I apologize for this, all of you folks who are watching us on YouTube, while I figure this out. Let me see here. Not sure what is happening. I'm gonna pause here for just 1 second. Bear with me while I figure out what's happening on Facebook. Folks on YouTube, I will be right back. I apologize for this. Hello on Facebook. I apologize for the lag. We had some broadcasting issues. If you're watching on Facebook right now, could you please just post something? Post a hi or a like or something so that I know that the folks on Facebook are seeing this. We had to reboot, and that was a little bit unplanned. But my name is Bob Abbey. I am an adult services librarian for the City of Forest Grove. Again, if you're watching on Facebook, please let me know that you're able to see this. We had to reboot, and I want to make sure that everybody on Facebook is able to watch this. I'm going to go over to another screen and log in and make sure that we are able to see this. Okay, it looks like we're live now, so great. We've got some folks on Facebook who are saying hi. Thank you for your patience. Just, you know, things happen, right? So we are very fortunate to have Oregon's 10th Poet Laureate, Anis Mojgani, with us this evening. Before I bring Anis on, I want to just thank a couple of agencies who are responsible for maintaining the Poet Laureate program. That's the Oregon Cultural Trust and Oregon Humanities. Without their financial and administrative support, we couldn't have made this program possible, and we couldn't have brought it to you. So we're really excited that they continue to do this. I also want to talk just a little bit about a couple of upcoming programs that we have with the library in February. On February 9th, we're going to be hosting Nicholas Bucola, who is a professor of political science at Linfield University. He's going to be talking about his 2019 book, The Fire is Upon Us, James Baldwin, William F. Buckley Jr., and the Debate Over Race in America. Nick is going to be joined by Dr. Paul Snell, who is in the Faculty of Politics and Government at Pacific University. And then on the 23rd of February, we're going to be welcoming Walida Amarisha to give a talk on why aren't there more black people in Oregon. This is a hidden history. Walida is a poet, a public scholar, an educator, and also the director of the Center for Black Studies at Portland State University. So both of those programs we're very excited about hosting in February as part of Black History Month. One last thing before we get started. Live streaming is great because this is your opportunity to interact in real time with our since Anis is not actually able to see his audience, likes and comments and anything that you want to add are a great way for him to know you're out there, and they're a great way for us to see how you're engaging with this program. So please feel free to ask questions, make comments. Once Anis is done, I'll come back and he and I will have a little chat, and we can also share some of your comments and questions at the end of the evening. So I'm going to bring Anis on. Hi, Anis.
Hello, Bob.
Welcome to this evening's special presentation. We're really happy to have you with us, and happy that you can join us. As I mentioned before I brought you on, I'm going to step aside and hand things over to you, and then I'll come back in and we can have a little chat. How's that sound?
That's great.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Anis Mojgani.
Thank you, Bob. Hey, evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us from wherever you are, and literally wherever you are in regards to not just your town and your city, but your room, wherever that may be. Really excited to get to be here with you faceless masses, or faceless person, however many of you are feasibly out there. I'm gonna share some poems with y'all, and then we'll talk. And I don't know, the as in this new realm of virtual readings, it's such a very different beast. And so if I happen to see any questions that pop up in the chat as I'm reading, that might be something to answer during the show, I may do that. So if you've got a question, feel free to throw it out, and maybe we'll get to it before the question, the official question and answer. But in the meantime, thanks for coming. Come closer. Come into this. Come closer. You are quite the beauty. If no one has ever told you that before, know that right now. You are quite the beauty. There is joy in how your mouths dance with your teeth. Your smiles are simply signs of how sacred your life actually is, so step into it. Come closer. Know that whatever God might be, they asked the world around them to help them make something of worth. Woke from dreaming, scraped the soil from space's stuff. Somewhere inside themselves made you and were happy. You make that Lord happy. Come into this. Come closer. Know that something softer than us, but just as holy, planted pieces of itself into our feet that we might one day dance our way back. Know that you are almost home. Come just a little bit closer. There are birds beating their wings beneath your breastplates, gentle sparrows that ache to sing. Come aching hearts, come soldiers of joy, doormen of truth. Know that my heart was too big for my body, so I let it go. And most days this world thins me to where I'm just another cloud, forgetting another flock of swans, having shaved off so many of my corners that I have felt at home only in the shape of a ball, bending myself so far backwards that the song of my mother believed I was returning home. But believe me when I tell you that somehow my soul manages to squeeze itself into very narrow spaces. Place your hand beneath your head when you sleep tonight. Perhaps you will find it there, making beauty as we sleep, making beauty as we dream, making beauty as we turn over. When we turn over in the ground, may the ghosts that we have asked our answers of do that turning, kneading us into crumbs of light and into this thing, love thing called life. Come into it, come you wooden museums, gentle tigers, little giants. I see teacups upside down, glowing across your grins. Your hearts are like my hands. Some days all they do is tremble. I am like you. I am just like you. I too at times am filled with so much fear, but like a hallway knob that glows like chance before you. Grab it, turn and pull, walk through, back straight, chin up, eyes open, hearts loud. Walk through this with me. Walk through this with me. It's as it was brought up. I just had a show. Excuse me. I got something in my eye. Not metaphorically. Not like I'm crying. If I was crying, I would have little to no shame about sharing it. I last week I did a reading and did that poem, as I often open my shows over the years with that poem. And as someone commented, wondering about how that has taken a different shape, that poem, in the world that we live in. And it has been interesting to think about sharing a poem that speaks to the distance that we hold between both ourselves and ourselves and others, and bridging that distance. And so it's interesting to kind of like think about that in the world that we currently live in. I'm going to dip under here while I plug my computer just to make sure that this doesn't disappear while we're talking over the evening. In the world that we are currently in, where we literally should not be close to one another. And so I think that there is an element of what is the call, the charge upon us to take this time to find the ways to arrive closer to ourselves in this this solitary engagement that we are all engaging in together. So I don't know. It's just interesting to kind of hold that poem in a slightly different way, but also the same way over this last year. Yeah, I'm going to keep on doing some poems. In my underwear, I write poetry. Two-headed poetry, three-legged poetry, poetry with tin spigots and no training wheels. There are flames airbrushed across my back, and I have bare feet. I have bare feet. Feet. Speak up, I walk with sticks in my ear, and I'm filling twigs with sentences, filing my nails down with memories. My love, it can shave diamonds. Scientists speculate over it. I come from the moon. Neil and Buzz and that third guy, they walked across my tummy. I giggled, and a spoonful of cherub tasted like cherries and wallabies. I write 2 underwear poems. My poems take off both underwears and dance naked around the candelabra in the living room. I am writing wrist and rubber bands on the back of the belly's bathtub, pressing my lips to the shower curtain. I whisper, the goat man is in the woods dancing, the chupacabra, the bookman, the golden nugget. There is a cloud splintering like a kneecap inside of my leg. Buy me pants, mother. Buy me a hat. There are moths in my shoulders. I am shaking. I am full of love. I was full of love. I carved out pear-shaped slices of it and fed a million tired ankles. God sat on my shoulder like a cricket. I swatted a bee like a father's advice and asked for it again. Where can I go when every bridge has wheels running alongside its bottom? But I write poems with no training wheels. I write my skull like it was a color I was picking up and examining inside of my hands for the very first time. Standing at the corner of Central Park East and 63rd Street, I hold an imaginary football like a small child, stand 2 inches in front of the yellow wall and scream directly into the wall's bricks, go deep! And as I fling the pigskin against the wall, I try to catch my childhood bouncing back at me. Go deep! I am a 3-headed galumph, a blue giraffe, a water fountain on the moon. Catch me, carbon, catch me, galumph, catcher, catch me, Lord. Hold me like a bowl, like the clouds. Hold the moon, holding the rooftops of this city in my memories, in my veins. there is a lonely mermaid, murmuring all day long. She sings, he sings, such beautiful songs. Her throat is a girl I once knew. Her nose, it is made of silver. Her backbone is a plum. Her backbone is a plum. And should you go, and the snows fall, I will write your name in them. Catch a bird, kiss it, and let it go. Over the years, I've taken to introducing that poem by, which I didn't this time, so I'll have this footnote that speaks to. There's a part in there where I mention the members of the original Moon crew, but I make a joke of the anonymity of the third member, Michael Collins. And I like to mention his name either before or after the poem, simply because I think about someone had mentioned that there's an interview with, I forget who, but they were asked who they thought the loneliest human in history was. Their answer was Michael Collins. And even though Michael Collins subsequently has said, before he passed, that he didn't feel lonely. I think that that's such a when this person shared that with me, I thought it was such a funny and sad and beautiful and true feeling sentiment. The idea of three humans training together to go do a thing together that no one else on the planet is going to do, and that no one on the planet is going to accompany them on, and they leave everything that they know and they enter into the most vast, most emptiest thing that we as humans, I think, can comprehend, outer space. And while they're in this vast emptiness, two of those people leave the third one to be by himself. And it just makes me chuckle so much. But I also recognize that here's a person who got to go to space, and all I do is write poems here on Earth. So I like to make sure that his name, Michael Collins, is heard in the shadow of that poem, in the wake of it. So I live in Portland, Oregon, and it's been definitely an honor and a humbling one to get to spend the last 6 months and still another year and a half as the state's poet laureate. It's so rad to receive a position like that for a state that I'm not from, but is one that is definitely home. But I also wanted to share a poem with y'all about my other home, the home that I was birthed out of, the city of New Orleans, and a poem I wrote called 4 Stars about growing up down there. It's been a bit since I did this poem, so let me grab the book that it's in, just in case I don't remember it all. There was a wasp nest on the back porch. It looked like dead honeycomb. Outside was a hornet's hive. I stuck my hand out there. The sun buzzed loudly. Nothing could bite me. A caterpillar did. I climbed its tree. It kissed me with its back. Its hair was sharp enough to leave 4 stars spinning in my palm. The world spun through my arms and crashed onto our street, so I picked it up. At the back of the backyard was a tin shed falling apart. I swear inside it was a giant sleeping. I woke him, told him my dreams, and let him humming back into our yellow kitchen. The countertops were always covered in topsoil. My mother, she loved to garden and to collect marbles inside of mason jars. We were never allowed to touch them. I loved the smell of the air conditioner. There was a window unit in the dining room and another one in my parents' bedroom. Putting my face in front of its vents made me feel like Sunday. I could bike the whole square of the block in 2 minutes flat. My friends Jalal, Putt, and Rue, they lived around the corner from us. There was a tree in front of their house too big to be a birch. My friend Sam lived 2 fence hops away. His mother showed mine what God looked like. God, he smelled like my father. Both their beards were black bears. Me and Mom, we went fishing in the park. I caught 2 catfish and waited for them to die. They swam in circles inside of our refrigerator because no one had ever taught me how to kill anything. In Mississippi, we ate every single perch that I caught. The grasshoppers there, they're the size of an almond joy. My sister, she had a pet rat. Part of his ear was gone. His name was Pierre. I named my pet mouse after a favorite book. Charlotte's Web. She is buried under a white rock in the backyard the day our dog died. Pops found him hanging from the clothesline. I cried into my pillow. I was 10 years old. I could fit under the house. My knees didn't care. Neither did the dark. After the tub, the hallway from the bathroom to mine was a dark tunnel, breathing only to swallow me whole. I shivered and was more afraid of that walk than anything ever since. Even now, there are moments where it still shakes me. But there were times when the night sat beside me on my bed quietly, like it was a big man who had to do what I told him to do. He was too dumb, or he loved me too much. Either way, he had the same smile. I had never been stung by a bee before. I'm a whole life. Thank you. It's funny to think about saying thank you and like I have no idea if anyone has even joined me in this. So thank you to the echo. Thank you to the nothing. Yeah. So there's this poem I wrote some years ago actually, the very first love poem I ever wrote, when I was 17, the friend that I'd written it for, that I'd written it towards, a few years ago, they had posted this photograph on their Facebook, and it was a picture of a lemon tree, a tiny pot, seated on a windowsill, and the caption read, See the lemon tree I grew from a seed. How big you've gotten. And I thought, oh, what a terribly sweet sentiment that one is. And then I thought, oh, what a terribly stupid sentiment that is. Oh, what a terribly silly and strange sentiment that is. And I thought about how so much in our lives are this vacillating thing moving between that which is stupid and that which is sweet, that which we love, that which we hate, that which is so large and that which is so small. And I wrote some poems. Oh, lemon tree, I grew from a seed. How big you have gotten. You were so little when you were a seed, and now so big. And soon you will carry such round and lovely lemons, yellow and dimpled. When they grow too big for your thin branches and they leave this kitchen of mine, ask them not to forget it, this kitchen of ours. It is my favorite room in the house. And lemon tree, when you pick up to follow, please do think of me. I will think of you here when my hands are far too empty and my tongue is far too sweet. I will think of the quiet poem that was your shape. Lemon tree. Please, bring a scarf with you. Wherever you end up, it may be cold. And if it isn't, perhaps you'll one day travel to a place where it is. High-five me with your heart. High-thousand me with your hearts. I know you have many of them. We all love many things. I love biscuits. I love cheeseburgers. I love little pancakes. I've loved more than just things that I chew with my mouth. I did love my wife. Sometimes I would chew my wife's shoulder in my mouth. sometimes my wife, she was annoyed by this, but still, sometimes my wife did love me back. Some things that I've loved will never love me back. Random racist upon the street. While your rhetoric may anger me, I still have love for you, though you probably will not love me back. Walrus, I love you. Though were I to be around you, you would probably gore me with your tusks. Perhaps this is not a good example, as the wild unknowing of wild creatures is not necessarily the same as not loving something back. Perhaps also because I actually do not love the walrus, but simply mention him here because there's a small figurine of the walrus on the coffee table as I write this poem. However, I do love the elephant. I love the elephant. However, he too would probably gore me with his tusks. Again, not out of unlove, but perhaps fear. I do not love fear, but I respect him, and that he loves me, testing how well I carry the sword of my intent through the land of the midnight farm. The land of the midnight farm, it can be a strange and scary place, with perhaps serial killers and or possums lurking in its darkness. The serial killer may love me, but in no way that I wish to be loved. Their love may involve the removal of my skin and the wearing of it out to the club. The possum may love me, but I do not love the possum. In fact, I hate the possum solely because of how ugly I find the possum to be. And yes, I realize this is a shallow reason to dislike something, so I'm trying, possum. I'm trying to not love you so much. Instead, possibly be ambivalent to your existence. But oh, I want to hate you like I hate the thought of bee stings, black people, and beans. I put black people in there just to see if y'all were paying attention. I fucking love black people. I love white people, though sometimes I find both of them to be trifling. Don't get me wrong. The only mother that I've ever had is black. The only wife that I ever had is white. But damn if we humans are a trifling animal at times. But still, I love you, you mountains of trifle and futility, of perseverance and lightness, of incessant rowing towards the sun, even while facing it, wondering why there was no forward momentum. Turn around. Look at my many hands, holding up my many hearts in a mini high-five salutation to you, Nina Simone, Paul Newman. So many things in this world I have loved. Rising with the sun, sleeping in late, little pancakes. And even though they didn't turn around once when she got gone, my wife's shoulders. There's a poem called In My Library, There Are 17 Books. 1. I wore a shrine to you above my head for so many years. It sparkled like a Hindu god and hung there, the heaviest of my heaviest hats. 2. My face, it is a bicycle riding downhill. Lick me with your headlights. I will forget my helmet at home. Break my femurs upon your front fender. 3. I am filled with so much hip-hop. My elbow rhymes with dirty sandwich. 4. My dirty sandwich beatboxed and my elbow said back. I placed 2 pancakes upon 2 plates. When I cut them back and forth, the porcelain breaks. 5. I was never a broken man, but I too know how to pick the pieces up. Some days the pieces are all teeth pulled from the mouths of children. Some days they are simply books searching for a shelf. 6, I've carved shelves out of my heart to try and bring an order to things. All it did was make space. 7, the floor of my bedroom. It is a junkyard. It is filled with the myth of a giant earth-sized snake. Some days I am a god of thunder, lifting cats. Some days I walk 9 paces, turn and fall over again and again. I die every single time. 8, I know that peace can come with the finishing of a popsicle, and that some ceilings are prayers to Mustangs. Staring into the chandelier's candles, I have begged for its heat to carry me out of some of these rooms. So the eyebrows of God in furniture. 9, some furniture looks at you disappointingly. Some chairs still stare like they are still proud of what you are. 10, some legs are shaped like confessionals. And some confessionals are built like the bows of burning boats. Speaking through both, my body caught fire like everything else. 11, I've devoured so many forests. There is so much cedar wood in my belly, so much sawdust coating the floor of my love. I have been sweeping it up for so many days now, but each day I sweep a little more. One day my floors will be clean. 12, I clench my hands in a fist in case I run into myself. I have something I want to give him. I won't know what it is until he's standing here before me, peeling open my palms. 13, I was 8 years old, the first time I learned to break dance on the floor of Angela's bohemian loft apartment. Little Ray, he taught me the centipede. He was 13 and had a skateboard, was a lighthouse, a tower, Antarctica. So damn cold, he dropped the D and came up with an extra O. 14, I've pulled the bones out of my body and carved temples from them. Look under my nails. There is holy text in there. I do not know what it says, but some hours are spent doing nothing but staring into the tips of my fingers. 15, hold a mirror up to what I once was. You would only see guitar strings shimmering in the light. 16. When I snaked my body like the river, I didn't even need the music to play. The adults were in the other room. I used the floorboards as the beat. I stood up, dirt on my shirt. My teeth had been replaced with bits of gold. An old man held me in a pan and ran water over my bones and from under the dirt of his palms. Oh, how I shone. Oh, how I shone. Thank you. So I'm going to read a few more, and then we'll do some questions and talking between us. And then maybe I'll close it out with one last poem at the end of it all. So I was going to read a part. There's this book I wrote a few years ago called The Pocketknife Bible, and it's about growing up in New Orleans. But then there's a part in the last third where the main speaker of the poem, the boy that is essentially me, is in this strange, surreal dream landscape, and he comes across this adult who is him as an adult, but neither of them know that they are spending time with the other. And so this is before he comes across himself. And he's just recently entered this dreamscape. Somewhere between the bodies of the dark house and the gardens I could smell. I dreamt a pack of dogs. I followed them. They led me through the woods, and we ended up at a campsite that the stars used when on Earth. The tents were still pitched, but all empty, no constellations to be seen, like they had left in a hurry or like they would be back shortly. The dog sniffed at the campfire remains. I dreamt I looked at the sky. It looked like a swept floor. I imagined the giant broom. How empty it must sound. In the dream, I sat on a log. In the dream, the dogs began to howl. In the dream, I scratched a stick through the ashes and then joined the dogs in the howling under the sky. How strange that for something to sound empty, it has to make noise inside something else. I felt like we were pouring water down the sink of an abandoned house. A man in a long red cloak walked out of the trees. We stopped howling and watched him. I dreamt he asked to sit with us. Me and the dogs nodded. The man told us he was a writer of operas. He had a practice of writing an opera, then burying it and digging it up a year later. He said he was constantly writing operas and burying them. It seemed like every day a year had passed since one of his operas had been buried, so he was always digging one back up to finish it. He said the time the opera spent away from him, the time they spent in the earth, allowed something to happen. He didn't know if the things that happened were him not remembering the notes fully or the earth actually changing the music he had composed. He said he felt it didn't really matter which one it was. The music was the music. He said he had heard the water we were pouring out with our bodies, and incidentally, we were in the same place he had buried an opera last year. He asked if we would help him dig it up. I looked at the dogs. The dogs said nothing. I dreamt I took a shovel from the man's outstretched hand and began lifting the ground with it. I looked over at the man. He was singing softly as I shoveled. He sounded like the only canary left in the tunnel, and his cloak was red as the blood of the maple tree. I dreamt I unburied the man's opera. that it looked like a small brass box. I dreamt he opened the box to show me what it looked like. Inside were 2 brown birds turning blue. They cleared their throats and started singing. It sounded like walking through a woods and hearing a creek not too far off. I sat in the hole I made, and the man in the red cloak closed his brass box of birds and began filling the hole back up. I dreamt the man said, "You are my opera now." And I said, "Yes." "And you are mine?" And he said, "Yes. When next you unearth me, I will be very different." And I dreamt he covered me with the ground. The it's weird. I don't know if there's any questions, because for some reason I don't know if no one has any, but there's no chat on my screen. So maybe there's like folks are dropping stuff on Facebook or on YouTube. I'll have to go through there and take a look later to see if folks are digging this or hating it. Though I also years ago in the early days of YouTube stopped reading comments on videos, because there'd be like, a plethora of sweetness, and then there'd be like one tiny thing that would just like make you feel like you were just like a worm, no slight to worms. But so I was like, I gotta stop watching reading these comments. There's comments that are popping up right now. One of them was from my dear teacher from high school, Mr. Werner, who I took TV and video from, and he introduced me and solidified the love that I'd had as a child for movies, and introduced me to what that meant for making art with them, and the possibility of storytelling. So it's so wonderful to see your name surface up here, Paul. What time are we at? We're at 7:06. All right. The other poems I want to do right now. Let's see. Maybe I'll do 3 more, and then offended worm. I hope not. I'll do three or 4 more, and then see what questions may surface. So this is I want to read some stuff from my book, In the Pockets of Small Gods, which is a book that I wrote about grief. It is a book that I wrote after the end of my marriage, and a lot of the grief that I was feeling during that period as a result of that loss awakened me up to the reality that, at least for me, that grief is a thing that does not necessarily move linearly. And because I know when I was processing that loss from my marriage, it then opened up the grief and the loss from the suicide of my best friend from several years prior to that, and realizing that I never really truly processed that grief. And so then beginning to process that grief forced me to reprocess the grief of my marriage, and that reprocessing forced pre-processing grief from before. So it's just like this, unraveling thing. And so I wrote this book speaking to those things. But I do like to say that it is not a book that I feel is a sad book. It is definitely a book about sad things. But I hope that no one reads this and feels that it is a sad book. Though if you do, that's also all right. So. In the beginning, there was only the moonlight and the rain, and the mud that was left once the rain had stopped, and the footprints left in the mud, made by my boots from when outside in the rain I had stood beside the gate through the whole storm, watching out into the nothing that was on the other side of the fence. And once the rain had passed and I had trudged indoors, dredging the mud across my floors, and it was only the moonlight and an inch of rainwater collecting in my footprints in the yard and also upon the thin bodies of the night-blooming flowers from out in the distance, the animals began talking with the world, and I lay in my bed by the open window listening to that world being born out there, and I watched the swans drop from the dark air to fold the lights of the night sky into the down of their once soaring backs. And that's when you came home to find me upstairs asleep, having tried so hard to stay awake but failing. And you woke me with what I know not, the harshest softness or the most careful of violence. And your face was the first thing I saw in the familiar light of this new place. I was a tree of figs, a bushel of dates picked, plucked, and dipped in honey and rolled in oats. I waited days into months for something outside my body to pluck the edible parts of me from the parts of me that grow them. My bodies grew plump, soaking up the sun, making my thick skin under the afternoon light brown into amber, into gold, and almost translucent. In the warm hands of the setting sun, the snakes moved below me. The squirrels sought to eat me, and they tore my flesh wide. The seeds they couldn't fit in their cheeks they threw to the dirt. The snakes crawled above me. I clung to the underside of their bellies, praying that in the absence of wind that might have carried me to the soft soil of the far fields, that the slither of their leather might instead crawl me there with them. Do not let them tell you what in you you should grow, and what in you you should kill. They did not spin the years held by hands under the dirt for the purpose of dark gardening. Some were there as it happened. Some watched. And when you halfway climbed, were halfway torn from out the earth and went to bathe the dirty from your arms and back, only to find the dirt was actually holes, actual pieces of your body now actually gone. Some of them wondered why you could not simply clean yourself. There's strawberries upon the underside of the bed, growing you scratch so hard at, and through the softness you rest upon, to pull their small bodies out from the cracks. For you too were once a small body, falling upwards from others, had too once a grandmother, and how so very much she loved you, peeling oranges and grapes just to watch your very small mouth chew. Anise, may your heart like the moon grow, big and full, and in this absence of light, new. I'm gonna do share two more, and then Bob shall return, and we will. Sometimes I would lay in the garden and pretend I was a carrot. Sometimes I would crawl into the big leaves and I was a head of lettuce. Sometimes I would bury my soft paws in the softer earth and I was a rabbit. Sometimes in the garden I was a rock, was sometimes wishing I were two rocks, sometimes becoming three rocks. Sometimes in the garden as a rock I waited hundreds of years and it was only the wind that touched me. Sometimes I waited thousands of years, and not even the wind could move me. Sometimes in the garden, night would arrive with an enormous moon glowing full, like the skin of an orange-skinned woman in a more orange dress, and the night would use that moon to say to me, look, you are like how I am, and see how bright my body sometimes becomes. Sometimes I wait for spring. Always I wait for spring, and for my love to return like it, out of the cold and with flowers on their fingertips. When you're in your coffin, clinging down the river with all the other coffins in the water of the next world, all of them bumping and jostling against one another, the contents thrown about like riding in a small plane, you'll peek your head up to see what the racket is. You'll see the other coffins. Looking around, you'll see nothing but coffins and river and two banks distantly flanking the river and the biggest, tallest dark stretching above. So dark it feels like this place, big as it is, must be inside some sort of bigger place. There are still stars, though. Wherever this river is, you still see stars. And while looking around, you'll see that there are other heads peeking up out of their coffins. You yell across the dark, asking, "Do you know where we are?" And someone will answer back, "No." "You?" "No," you say back. You ask someone else, "What about you?" "Nope. I wonder where this is." And someone else will say, "I don't know, but it's big." And someone else, "Yeah, it's fast." And someone else, depending on what part of the river you're on, may also say, "Yeah, vast like the backside of Sean Brown." And even though no one on the river knows who Sean Brown is, some people on the river will laugh. Their chuckles will subside until a quiet sets in, a quiet like you sat down in somebody else's church. And somebody will then say to someone else, "Where are you from?" And they will say, "Texas." "What about you?" "Boston." "Boston?" "Yeah, Boston. I know someone from Boston. Kate Lee. You know her?" "No." "What about Stephen Ellis?" "Well, I'm actually in Somerville." "Somerville?" "Yeah, Somerville." And someone else on the river will then yell out, "Somerville? I know someone in Somerville." "Who?" "Nick Cathcart." "You know him?" "I do. I do know him." "Yeah? Yeah. Oh man, small world. Yeah, Nicky's a great guy. He is. I hadn't seen him in 5-10 years, and when I did, he had a first edition of an E.E. Cummings book to give me." And the first person may or may not know who E.E. Cummings is, but will still agree that yes, Nicky is a great guy. And then it will get quiet again until someone else asks, "Where is it that we are?" And no one will answer. A few people shrug. All of you will look into the stars, collecting overhead. You'll try to think of someone you might know that lives in Somerville or Texas or Florida or France, just to have something to talk about with a person you never met before, just right now. Just to share something in this dark quiet, even though all of you are already sharing the river and the sound of the current bumping all of you into one another, and you'll wonder where this water is taking you and how long it will be before it brings you there and what there will be like. If it'll be like here on the river, with all of us sitting in our boxes trying to split the dark by sharing our voice with others. If it'll be like how it was in the world before this one. Thank you. Bob, would you like to rejoin me on the screen?
Yes. Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Boy, I apologize for we've got some lag tonight. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's
I think it. As I was just actually saying in my show last week, I think one of the nice things about this virtual world is that I think that there's such a our grace has been widened, our capacity for tolerance and forgiveness. It's like, because it's just kind of like, well, things happen, So yeah,
you just got to let go, right? Exactly. You just let go. So when you were actually off screen at the beginning and you didn't hear, I was having some problems with Facebook, and unfortunately, I didn't actually even introduce you. Right? So you got no introduction. So what I want to do is maybe give you like an extraduction. How's that? Like a post introduction, because some people are like, they know who you are, right? But I mean, it's just a kind and hospitable thing to do, to introduce our speakers. So I want to just make sure I get that covered, and then I have a comment to make about Michael Collins. But but first of all, I just want to again thank Anis for joining us. For those of you who don't know, and there may be one or two of you out there who don't know this, in April of 2020, Oregon Governor Kate Brown announced that Anis was the newest Poet Laureate of the state, and in her press release, she praised him as, and I want to quote, "the pragmatic optimist Oregon needs in these unprecedented times. His words breathe fresh air into the anxiety and negativity that we all feel. He urges us to resolutely reflect in the moment, and with each grounding breath, our hearts come closer and come into this. Anis has written 5 books of poetry. He's a 2-time National Poetry Slam champion, winner of the International World Cup Poetry Slam. He's done commissioned works for the Getty, the Peabody Essex Museum, and Third Angle New Music, and I want to talk about that as well. He's also been awarded artist residence from Vermont Studio Center, AIR Serenbe, and the Bladel Nature Reserve, and his works have appeared on HBO, NPR, and as part of the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day series, and in the pages of the New York Times, Rattle, Platypus, Winter Tangerine, Forklift, Ohio, and Bat City Review. And also most recently, his poem Closer has been included in this, in this amazing anthology, African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song, edited by Kevin Young. This is a New Library of America book. This is a great, great collection. Buy this. This is a library copy, but be sure to pick this up. This has got some amazing work in it, and Anis, congratulations on being included in this anthology.
Thank you, Bob.
So I mentioned Michael Collins. Michael Collins is actually my second cousin.
Whoa!
Yeah, on my mother's side. So we used to joke that he drove the getaway car. But
Like that.
but that's a whole other story. Thank you for bringing him up. So we've got lots and lots of comments, and I popped some of them up on the screen. We have got somebody from Japan. We've got folks from Texas, from New Orleans. I mean, people all over are here, and this is so great to experience this. I want to just have a little chat with you, and then we can share some of their comments. So you have been Poet Laureate now since May, I think, is when you officially took over, right?
Yeah.
What a time to be Poet Laureate, right?
Yeah.
How have you been doing in all of this?
I don't know. It's one of my friends the other day was like, "You deserve to get an extra year." Yeah, like that. Because definitely, I mean, it is very strange. That like one of the things that when I first got in, when that it was like in February that I got in, shared that I'd been selected, and that it was now up to the governor to confirm that appointment, or not confirm that appointment. Excuse me. And so when I first got in wind of that, the excitement that I felt was one that was like, oh, what now I finally get to feasibly see the state of Oregon in the way that I've always wanted to and never have until this point. Having the reason and the push to go see the state and speak to the state. And when I say that, not necessarily the people, but just like the state itself, and like to get to engage with conversation with the land and the places that I've hungered to, while also like getting to visit with people and communities and engage with them in a manner that either introduces poetry to them, hopefully builds something poetic, that I get to like be a part of, or lifting that up, in new ways. And and then the pandemic arrived, and it's like, well, you don't really get to travel right now, and so that has definitely been honestly a very frustrating sadness, in this time, and it is what it is, and I'm definitely grateful that that we live in a time that technologically wise, like that I am able to visit with communities, like this, that this is able to happen. That next week I get to read and workshop with students in Albany, Oregon, So I'm grateful for that. But it is like definitely a challenge of like how to get the ball rolling on different projects that I'm curious about, of what it means to engage with poetry with public spaces, people, hearts, and how to make that happen when my life is mostly relegated to my home and a very small radius around it. So I don't have anything to compare it to, but it has been different.
So think back to 2020. What were you doing when you got the announcement about being nominated?
I was actually I'd gone to Vashon Island in February for a couple days. Some friends of mine have this like extra tiny little house on their property, and they were kind enough to let me go for a couple days to just sit and write. And I just dropped off. I'd just gotten back to Portland and dropped off the car rental, and was walking home, and it was like one of those treats of a sunny day in February in Portland, and got this call from Adam at Oregon Humanities to give me this news, and I was just elated. It was like the sun outside my body was suddenly matched by like sun inside my body. But it was also like funny to be like, oh, got this news that I'm super pumped and excited about, but I also like can't really talk about it, outside of like a very small circle, because it's not 100%, but I was so excited, I still am excited, but yeah, it was a very joyful feeling.
Yeah. Who did you tell? Who was the first person you told?
I'm trying to think who the first person I told was. Probably it was either someone in my family or my family, like my siblings and my parents, or it may have been like I told them, and I told two of my closest friends, Jared Brown and Chris McKeith afterwards, because the three of us have sort of like a group that we have been meeting virtually for a number of years to sort of like hold each other accountable and supportive with our personal professional goals. So like, they were aware of like what was feasibly happening behind closed doors with the laureateship, and so they were some of the first folks that I did tell.
So you didn't just like walk down the street and say, Poet Laureate.
Hey guys, Poet Laureate coming through here. Inside. Where's my free sandwiches? That's what this roll's about, right?
Right. I mean, doesn't that that the title kind of confer some of that? I mean, it just seems like that should go with the territory.
It was funny, like the amount of folks that would ask my friends that would be like, so does it come with a sash or a jacket, a special hat? Like it was all about like what's the gear that you get to rock as like the Poet Laureate? I was like, I don't know, but I should probably get like a custom made like satin bomber jacket or something.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
There's still time.
Yeah, like a nice cummerbund or something. Yeah. So for folks who don't know, the Poet Laureate position is for 2 years, and you have some responsibilities. Can you talk a little bit about what those responsibilities are and kind of how you envision the role given the limitations because of travel and so forth?
So I mean, like the responsibilities are actually pretty small, in a rather technical manner. Like the only actual responsibility is needing to give a set number of public appearances over the course of the 2 years. Which I think in total is like 20. Maybe it's 20 a year, but I think it's 10 a year, for a total of 20 over the 2 years, if memory serves. And, other than that, and that being the world that we're in being right now, there is some aspect of that, I think, like being like reassess during this time. Like, well, what does that mean, a public appearance? But so that's like kind of like the only like responsibility on paper. And the other aspect is largely like, specific to the individual laureate themselves, with regards to what is of importance and what is a focus for them as the person they are, of how they want to serve that position. And for me, I tend to hold it and define it as, me serving as a steward to and of poetry to and for the people of Oregon, and using that to kind of like find the ways in which that I want to do that. So for me, there's a number of projects that I'm really interested in trying to manifest. I'm very drawn to what what the boundaries of a poem are, with regards to finding the ways to engage with people, and break that expectation and connotation of like, oh, this is what a poem is, and having them perhaps like read as like, oh, is this thing that is before me a poem? Maybe I didn't know what poetry could be. Perhaps there's something in me that is of a poem. So I'm really drawn to that. I'm drawn to how words collect and interact with us in spaces, particularly public spaces. So I like right now I'm doing some research about feasibly a poetry phone line, and prior to the election season, I was researching to try to put together the possibility of a poetry newspaper of some sort. And so now that some things have sort of died down, I'm picking that back up to see about how I can print that and get it out to folks across the state.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what do you think, I mean, whether you want to think about Oregon or if you want to think sort of locally in Portland or maybe even nationally or internationally, I mean, what do you think poetry can give us right now in this moment that it might not have in the past? I mean, what else can we use poetry for in this moment?
I will, the kind of gift I think about right now with regards to poetry, I think there's two things that stand out to me most. One, something that ways in which it's always been there for us, in that like it can very much serve as a point of peace and inspiration in these like very uncertain, very troubling, very challenging and dangerous times. Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think poetry has always served those things. But I feel I have seen an upswing online of folks collecting poems. When I think like whenever poetry is one of those things where I feel like somebody was joking about this like sometime over this past year. Before that, like poetry is one of those things that like nobody cares about until they suddenly need a poem. Like, oh, my sister's getting married. Like, what's a poem that I could like use for this? Mm-hmm. But the thing is, like, the period that we're living in right now is like an extended period in which a situation where some of us might have been like, oh, I need a poem right now to deal with this like hard thing that I'm going through. This hard thing that like is very specific to right now that will like shortly pass. But we've now been in that hard thing for a year, Mm-hmm. And so I think it is the draw towards what poetry has given us in the past. That has expanded more. But also, the thing that I use poetry for so much for is like to process myself, to process the relationship of my interior self to the external self. And right now we are all being, whether we take this up or not, we are all being pushed to engage with that conversation with ourselves, because we are removed from our usual ways of life, our usual rhythms of life, our usual outlets, our usual escapes, our people, our circles. And that has shrunk so much more in many cases to just be oneself. And poetry provides a line of communication to making sense of that. And I think like many of us are in a position now where we've never engaged with what it means to dialogue with ourselves, or if we have on a very, very small level. And poetry is a tool that can be used to, to remedy that. So I think in that manner, it's definitely being used, I think, differently um, uh, than how it might have in the past by individuals.
Mm-hmm. We've had lots of great comments and questions, and I want to just share some of those with you. We've had several folks comment about grief, and grief is such an overriding part of In the Pockets of Small Gods, right? I mean, there's this sort of the grief associated with the end of your marriage, the grief associated with the death of your friend. And one of the questions is grief seems to destroy the threads of narrative when one tries to weave them. In what ways do you think the rules of narrative are ruptured by grief or trauma?
That's a good question, and like I think as I spoke a little bit earlier when I was reading from the book that it I think like grief and trauma, they require us to unfold differently in time than how we are used to, how the world trains and shapes us to. We're forced and required to move through our day to day, move through our existence in a very linear fashion. Um, and grief kind of throws that out the window, because it holds up something and you pick at this and something falls off of that. And so then you go to pick up what this is. And while you've still got this thing being held in your hand, you're like, oh, well, what's over on this thing? And something falls off of that, and you go to pick that up, And so you're now holding all these different things that also have all their threads coming off of it. Last week I was talking about how, when I was writing that book, a lot of the challenge for me was trying to find the narrative, the art that I was trying to communicate to people, because it didn't move in a linear fashion. And, it was kind of like, you move forward in one direction, and then that storyline requires you to then move backwards, and then it requires you to move forward again, but then it requires you to go to the right, and from the right it requires you to go forward, and from there to the left, and then backwards, and then you're like back where you started off. So it's just like this unfolding thing. Because it's all of, grief essentially comes down to like, what are it being a tool that's allowing us to heal in the ways that we need to heal. Mm-hmm. And there are things that we have covered up. And so it's like some of those wounds, get repicked and they get reopened, and they have to be dealt with in a manner that is not just like putting gauze over it, that things that we thought we had healed were just treated, and they haven't been healed. Mm-hmm. And grief requires us to do that. So it becomes a very non-linear narrative, I think.
Right. We had a comment from Nicole. She says, I teach the psych of death and dying in New Jersey. Your poetry on loss, grief features often. You've impacted my students profoundly, taught them beautiful ways to channel their hurt, just so you know.
Well, thank you. Thank you for letting me know.
Yeah. And it seems to me that in this moment, in this time, one of the things poetry does is it gives us words for situations where there just simply are no words. I often find myself completely bereft of knowing what to say, and a poem may allow me to kind of channel that thinking in a certain direction, and perhaps as we're processing grief and trauma, which we all have to do in our own way and on our own time, poetry can provide a key to open that door and to guide us. Yeah. Let me see here. I want to share a couple of other Let's see. Elizabeth writes, you've been finding yourself in communion with lately. In other words, who are some writers you're most excited about right now?
Um, right now, I have a stack of Joy Harjo books, our current national laureate, that I'm excited I've read um, books and work of hers in the past, and there's an event in April that I'm fortunate enough to get to do with her. So I wanted to make my way through her catalog. So I'm excited about that. Um, outside of that, there's right now I've been making my way through E.B. White's books for kids, like uh, first book of the year was Charlotte's Web, and then I read Stuart Little, and so now I'm going to start Trumpet of the Swan, which is one that I've never read. And then also, like just the other day, I finally got around to reading the poet Ross Gay. He's one of my favorite poets, and his book, Catalog of Unabashed Gratitude, is one of my favorite collections of poetry. And he had a new book length poem come out last year called Beholding, and I read that this past weekend, and it was remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
So that's some of the stuff that's been lurking
Mm-hmm,
around.
mm-hmm. Well, you mentioned Ross Gay. You probably saw that his Book of Delights was listed as the 2021 Everybody Reads for Multnomah County.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful book, by the
It
way.
is.
And what I one other thing I want to just talk to you about is one of the things that he does in this book is he sets up this practice, this ritual, right? He's going to write every day about something that delights him. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, particularly in the moment we're in, what is your process like, and has it changed in terms of how you create?
I mean, it's definitely changed, and it's in flux. Like I don't know, like what it is right now, and um, like pre-pandemic, for a spell, I was in a place where I was trying to find. I was feeling a little stale and feeling removed from certain aspects of creative endeavors that I wanted to be doing. So like uh, it, um, it was something that I wanted to kind of like switch up for a bit, but like didn't really know the process for doing that. And then the pandemic began and kind of required me to, but it also required me to do it in a very strange and saddening and traumatic way. And I mean, like generally in previous years, my process and practice has been one that was Monday through Friday. I would leave my house sometime between 8 and 9, and go to one of a few coffee shops in my neighborhood, uh, and be there until it was time to break for lunch. And that was my practice, and then whether it was me sitting down and just starting to move my hand across the page and see what came out, or whether that was me taking work that was already out and that I was working on developing and crafting, was up for grabs. But that was my general practice, and now it's I don't get to go sit at my usual coffee shop. I don't get to try and claim my seat by the window, and say hello to the baristas that I've said hello to for the last 10 years, and so it's been a lot of kind of jumping around, like working at the dining room table, working in the garage, going to I have a workspace at the Sidell shipyard, so like going there. And so it's been this process of like trying to see like what works amongst this, while also like recognizing that the umbrella that I'm living under, that we're all living under right now, is not the norm. It is both not the norm and it is our required normalcy,
Mm-hmm.
and so like that surrealness and that also shifting of like having to like carry it as opposed to reject it, is also this like weird thing of kind of like, all right, how to make life normal while also like not, that it's like makes no sense to me to be like, all right, Anise, you're gonna show up for work like you got to, and every single day, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't do that every day.
Mm-hmm.
Some days it's just like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I guess that's that. But it's yeah, it's not my practice hasn't yet figured itself out in the pandemic time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I know you've talked in the past about vulnerability and uncertainty, right, and how those kind of
Yeah.
factor in your creative process. And I want to just wrap up because I'm very curious about a project that you've undertaken with Third Angle
Yeah.
to write a libretto for an opera. Now, um, I would imagine most people hear that and they think, "Wow, that's a dead art form," which it's not. But can you talk a little bit about sanctuaries and what that project means for you?
Yeah. So the musician, jazz pianist Gerald Grant, he approached me. Snaps. I guess it was fall of 2018 was when he first approached me. I believe it was. It might have even been a little bit before that. Um, yeah, it might have been the year prior to that. He first, I think, approached me to say like, "Hey, my name's Daryl. I've been commissioned to uh, compose and arrange music for an opera that is on the themes and history of gentrification and urban development within Portland's history." Um, and was wondering if you would be interested in writing the libretto for it. And I, I'm not a listener of opera. Um, I'm curious about it. Like I love the feasibility of like there being a thing that um, tells a story, communicates a story. Largely, like if I were to go to an opera and watch it, like a traditional opera, I would have no idea what is being sung. Like I'm not sitting there like absorbing the story through a literal fashion. But the story is being conveyed to me via uh, the emotion in the theater of what is happening, unfolding before me. And to me, that's a really fascinating thing. To me, that's like a poem. The poem is not something that is always tangible because it's seeking to translate the language list into language. And so it was something that I was like really curious about, and even more so like um, uh, as a person of color in a city like Portland, in a state like Oregon, um, uh, Portland's relationship to gentrification and displacement and development has been something that has consumed me since I first moved here in 2004. And so the opportunity to with regards to like my process, it doesn't always allow for me to write specifically to the things that I care about, the things that I'm angry about, the things that I'm saddened about, um, because I tend to write from a point of discovery in regards to like I'm going to sit down and write and see what happens, and something's going to reveal itself, and then I'll follow that. And so it doesn't always allow for me to write to the things that you know socially and politically mean something to me. And this was an opportunity to have that. So I was like, yeah, let's do this. And I worked on it for like I basically started like Daryl handed me like a loose kernel of a plot that he had developed with characters. And that started out in a very like concrete place. Like it was like very much about the historic timeline in Portland over a number of generations, and dealing with about like 8 different characters, both black and white. And so I started like working on that sometime. I think it was like around November or so of 2018, and eventually that went through a number of changes, and finally like got passed over to Daryl and the director Alexander to I think it was like the last draft for me was almost a year later, like around like August or so of 2019. And as I mentioned, went through a number of different changes. Like it was a lot more abstracted by the finishing point. It was 5 characters, all black, and there's definitely things in it that are like it is something that is speaking, I think, specifically to how displacement unfolded here in Portland, while also like speaking to the relationship of displacement to the African diaspora here in America. So it retained some specificity, though abstracted, but then also sought to create kind of like a larger collective with regards to being black in this country. And so like it was supposed to originally go up in April of 2020, but of course COVID happened. And so now it is set to go up September of this year, 2021.
Great. Well, Third Angle is a great group. I know many of the musicians, and I'm really looking forward to having an opportunity to hear you do something in a different venue. I think that that's one of the exciting things about this period that we're in. I think about Arundhati Roy talked about the pandemic as a portal and as a way to bring new things onto the other side, and we can either come through with our baggage, or we can start over. And it sounds like one of the things that you're doing during this period is figuring out how to start over and to try new things. And that's really exciting. I'm wondering if you could leave us with one final poem. I'll leave the stream while you read, and then I'll come back in to say goodbye to everybody. Let me disappear here for a bit.
Yeah, thanks y'all so much for joining us tonight, and have some more things coming up in the upcoming months. Just next week, I'll be doing something with, as I mentioned, Lynn Benton Community College in Albany. So if you're around next week, look into that. But yeah, strange times we are in, and I was just saying to my roommate, I was like, what's gonna happen tomorrow? You know, I don't know, but I also know that I don't know, not like in any type of like Pollyanna type of lens, but that like all these things that are happening are so very important, and some of them are really catastrophically detrimental to individual lives and individual communities around this country and this globe. And at the same time, I also try to hold on to that, you know, the seasons turn and the world spins, and you know, I look to how we find our place of spinning with it. So yeah, take that as you may. And when spring arrived, I took a class to learn something I had never before learned, and a thing I thought I might love. How did we make it through this winter after the year we have had, and while knowing what might await us in the new one? How amazing we who have stayed are, how beautiful and heavy and vulnerable we who couldn't were. When spring arrived, I learned how to carve from wood a large spoon. I hadn't ever done this before and haven't done it again since yet, but I learned it as I've learned more how to hold my heart again and whisper into it and once more listen a little better to the songs it sings, even mouthless with no mouth it sings. And even when no note heard, nor even made, I am listening, or at least learning to always try to. So perhaps it is not the longest night we at times find ourselves in, but simply the slowest of dew forming upon us. Thank y'all so very much.
Anis, thank you so much for that.
You,
Folks, let's give Anis a social media round of applause. Please show your likes and loves on Facebook and on YouTube. We are so fortunate to have you join us, Anis, and thank you for all you do and for sharing your art with us this evening and for making our lives a lot better.
Well, thank you, Bob.
A reminder for those of you who tuned in late, this program will be available on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So feel free to stop by and revisit anytime, particularly the section where Anis is reading. We hope to see you all next month for our two programs on the 9th and on the 23rd. Again, Anis Mojgani, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. And everybody be well, be safe, and we'll see you soon.